Okay, I'm gonna start by saying I originally did not intend to do a short discussion about this before because, well, I had other commitments.
Okay, I'm gonna start by saying
Unfortunately, there seemed to have been a problem. Uh, the communications with that. No, that's not what I'm trying to say. I I was meant to do something else on Discord. But the thing is that Discord suddenly, for some strange reason, stopped working. So, well, I couldn't do that plan. And therefore I have to do this right now, and hopefully Discord will solve itself at least tomorrow, and I can try it then. At least I hope so. I'm not sure. So I feel a little bad to be doing this now when I was planning on doing something else with another one. However, again, Discord for some strange reason stopped working. So this is just me, the angry anime fan, the despair reviewer. Don't get me wrong, though. I was going to have a discussion about this, even though I technically already have. Anybody who has checked out my previous video about about Hiromashima's Trinity? I'll intend to send the link in the description below. It probably isn't there right now, but I will try to find it at least later. So, well, yeah, you will find it then. But but for now, let's just talk about this show again. Rave Master, as you all know, was Hiromashima's first real manga. He had published short stories, I presume, but this was the first time he has actually done these works, so to speak. So this here video is me talking a little bit about Rave Master, why I felt like Rave Master was an unappreciated classic, and also why I still feel like, even though I don't always go back to read it, what I do read in it is what I like. In my video of Hiromashima's Trinity, I went through to all those thoughts, so a lot of that thought probably will already be here, including the fact that those who are not familiar with it, Rave Master is, as I said before, Hiromashima's first work, and it followed Haru Glory, and later on Ellie, as they try to recover the Raves, magical orbs that could utilize a sword of Rave in order to banish the Dark Brings, which are dark rubies that contains very dangerous power that an organization is using for evil. It started off as a very typical fantasy adventure, so to speak. The boy meets girl, and the boy and the girl naively heads out to the world. Although they technically not that naively, it's clear that they don't really know anything about the world. Haru comes from a garbage island, as it's called, an isolated, or well, I mean, not that isolated, but an almost forgotten vacation island, which hardly has any people in it. And while Ellie is a girl with amnesia, although also this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't read Raid Master, then I will first say you are foolish. Then I will say, well, beware of spoilers. Ellie is a girl with amnesia, although later it's revealed that she holds something much more inside of her that is showing that her amnesia is something we do not really expect, so to speak. Either way, in the in the series, Haru meets Ellie, and they befriend each other, while Ellie helps Haru look for, the Raves. Uh, Haru tries to find the lost memories of Ellie, and all the time they try to do that. All the time, sorry, I got distracted. All the time while they try to do that, they met more allies and more friends that later on joins the cause. The first ally is Mushika. It's not his first name, it's his family name. A guy who is one of the few people who do not have the power of a Darkbring. In fact, he can merge, well, not merge, he can manipulate silver thanks to a technique made by a guy. He's at the beginning a leader of a, well, a thief gangs, so to speak, a gang of thieves. But later on, joins Ellie and Haru's quest as their most loyal friend, as well as the sidekick. So no, maybe that's the wrong word. The what is that? Sorry, what is that word? I was gonna say the Lancer to Haru. They're later on joined by a dragon humanoid, or at least a dragon, a guy named Jet, who at first only looks for strong opponent, but after having his, well, motivation by Haru, strangely become their ally, while still very loyal to, well, while he eventually evolves into being very loyal to Haru. It's worth noting that it takes a little time before he really do feel loyal to him. And then finally they're joined by the annoying Ruby, the strange yellow-like guy. I forget his name, although technically he's not really that liked. And also Plu, a strange creature that people think is a dog or something else, also joined their cause. Sorry, I'm yes again. I have to do this. Sorry. I've had a cold, but I think I am on the road to recovery. At least I presume I am. And what was I? Oh yeah. And later on, they're joined by everyone else, including Jet's childhood friend Romance and many more. Well, not many more. Also a magic girl that may be something like Ellie, because Ellie is special because apparently she holds Ethereum inside of her. A magic that is the only thing that not only one of the things that not only can defeat the Darkbrings, but also endless. As the story takes a turn to another turn, when at first the villain in the story is a ravishing lunatic of a man who has drowned himself in despair. At first, he was the best friend of Haru Glory's father, until a tragedy and a misunderstanding drove him to embrace the myth of his blood, because apparently there were two bloodlines once, the Rare Groves and the Glories. The Glories were heroes of an ancient kingdom in this place, while Rare Groves was said to be the Destroyers. And King, as they were called back then, were best of friends, but eventually evolved into mortal enemies due to the fact of a misunderstanding. I mean, King misunderstood what Glory did, and that turned into a tragedy. But he blamed it all on his bad blood. And eventually that even evolved into the new main antagonist, which, strangely enough, without any amount of foreshadowing, there was actually only one single foreshadow, and that was a flashback where we saw that he had a family. The new villain turned out to be none other than, well, his son. And in the end, the generation of vengeance continued through, well, Haru and Lucia. Basically, their fathers were enemies, and now they also became enemies. But also another antagonist that strangely never really played a very large part in the stories. All that we knew of that was that it needed to be destroyed was Endless, a being of pure energy that had the power to basically erase everything. In other words, an endless amount of suffering, so to speak. The story then takes many different turns, as this is a story of both fantasy, adventure, time travel, and even conspiracy, so to speak. Because one of the most difficult things to accept about Rave Master, I think, is mostly towards the end, when it turns out that the world they are living in is not the world they are living in. It's an illusion, or maybe an illusion is wrong word. it was no, actually, what is the word? Not an illusion, an alternate reality, so to speak. Because the real world died a long time ago, and a lone woman used star memory, an ancient magic like memories that could basically contain memories. She used the memories of the real world to rewind it and create a separate dimension, which was the world that they are living in now. And that unfortunately spawned Endless, according to Rare Groves, as a punishment for allowing this world to be reborn, or in their words, allowing a fake world to be born. However, Haru and friends refuse to believe that this world is a fake, because even if it's not the world that used to be, it is the world that is now, and they are the ones that do it. So in the end, they do defeat Lucia and defeat Endless, although it seems at a heavy cost, until that cost is subverted. And then it turns out that the ones who have saved them all this time have been the stars. Basically saying that the star memory was the stars that remembered every single memory of the other people. And in the end, they were moved by Haru and their friends. The resolve to prove that this world is real, even if it was created from a different thing. Therefore, it's their world, and they will fight for it. They were moved by their sacrifices, so they all saved them, basically to show that this their thanks for everything. A lot of people did not really like that ending, but I felt it was pretty moving. Okay, we have talked about the story. Now, what can we say about it? Well, that we haven't already said. Well, let's see here now. As I said before, Rave Master was mostly a fantasy adventure, and it really stayed true to that. The countries were not that modern, but they were not that ancient either. They were all going to place to find these raves, meeting deceased soldiers that have taken form of other animals while getting them, and then many things more. Having said that, Rave Master was not perfect, and I can understand why a lot of people didn't want to read it. The art at the beginning is not that polished. In fact, it's pretty dirty. In a way, it's even filthy. It didn't even it took about 130 chapters or so before the art finally began to get a little bit cleaner. But it's worth noting that this was Hiromishima's first manga. I don't think he had found his style yet, although today a lot of people complain that he stole the style from the more popular artists of their time. I'm saying, well, I prefer he was inspired by it, and in the end adapted to that. The fact that he could capture that so much art through that is just simple amazing in my book. So another thing is that I talked about in my Trinity, what I felt like Ray Messer had most of was characters, and there were a lot of characters. Not as much as in his previous works, but the main characters were easy to understand. But yes, I do realize though that they were not perfect either, because I mean, again, what I liked about Rave Master was the adventure, the fact that there was a small group in the beginning, and in the end there were a group of 10 people. And although they could have all gone on adventure, every single one of them, and could have started like that, the fact that the group grew into a big group, and then, well, spread their jollies by working together and stopping this problem, yes, for me, showed a remarkable amount of heartwarming. It's basically a story about people meeting and becoming friends, and all heading towards the same goal, which is to protect those they love so they can have a future. But despite that, the characters were pretty bland in a way. They were simple to understand. Haru Glory, for example, the main character, he's a very good description of an all-loving hero. From start to finish, he never loses his kindness, and that's not a bad thing, mind you. Which has made this is one of the reasons why a lot of people preferred Haru Glory over
Natsu Dragneel from Fairy Tail. While Natsu was kind, it's worth noting he was a lot more hot-headed than Haru Glory was. And while Haru Glory was hot-headed, he still always fought about his friends, and he always did what he could for the better of the people. He never discriminated against anyone. He didn't even discriminate against his other friends that were not even human. For them, they were his friends, and they were people. He even said the one words to the dragon lady that she never thought she would hear, and that was the fact that when she said, "It's pitiful, isn't it?" About her homeland, Haru just said, "It's beautiful." This practically solidified what Haru was. And even before that, it was solidified in when he faced off against the first antagonist of the first saga. He was angry at that antagonist for what he had done, but he still shed more tears over the fact that that man had been hurt just as much as he had, and even said to him, "I'm not fighting you because you are of Rare Grove. I am fighting because I need to put an end to this so that everyone can be happy." He knew what he had to fight for, and even though he didn't like it, he fought for the people he loved, and that is one of the reasons what makes Haru a very good character. But he was pretty loud. His anime voice actor was okay. I mean, even in the English dub, it felt okay, but the dub of the anime was not that great. In fact, the anime itself wasn't that great. Ellie, on the other hand, she was one of the first examples in Hiro Mishima's work of fan service girl. She wasn't the typical fan service girls that Hiro Mishima later on evolved. It is worth noting that she had shorter hair, at the first at least, that which a lot of his now female protagonists do not have. I think I know why he allows many of the females to have long hair, because I think he likes long-haired girls more now because he feels like they are more feminine. And don't get me wrong, Ellie was feminine, well, maybe tomboyish, but she was dressed in skirts a lot. Ellie at first looked like a ditzy, extremely lucky gambler, and she was extremely fun to watch. See, she could sometimes be a little bit obnoxious, but she was very fun, and the fact she was ditzy. But then later on, to find out that she held such deep sadness within herself over the fact she didn't even know of, made Ellie a very tragic character. Not the fact that she was doomed to have tragedy, it's the fact that everything she was at the beginning, her deepest fear was that she would lose herself. And in a way, she almost did. But thanks to her friends, she didn't. And that is one of Ellie's most things. Because unlike Haru, sorry, Ellie went through character development. As I said before, Haru was kind from start to finish, and he never ever backed down from what he believed in. Not even from the truth that was revealed. Ellie started this journey off as a ditzy, very, very lucky gambler with a lot of hidden despair inside of her heart, and later on was shown to be a very deep girl, troubled by trauma, and worried that she was not going to be who she wanted to be, showing insecurity, but in the end fell in love with Haru, and yes, Haru fell in love with her as well, and in the end used what she had to better the world, even if that meant losing the one person she loved. Mushika. Mushika started off very good, but in the end he ended pretty badly, I have to say. Mushika was pretty slick and cocky, uh, but he was always, but he made up for that through fierce loyalty. While at the beginning, pretty cocky and all that stuff, in the end he evolved into a pretty chill dude that Haru depended on to do it, and he even believed that Haru uh, would win. But unfortunately, at the end, he never even got the final antagonist to fight, because his storyline at the beginning was just to find out about an ultimate silver. He fell in love with a woman that unfortunately sacrificed her life for him, and his story arc in the story was basically done. After that, he was just Haru's Lancer. Yet, also didn't go through very much character development because it's mostly subverted. Jet was a dragon guy who at first looked like dragon and then got a humanoid form. He was looking for strong opponents because he wanted to defeat his arch rival. Eventually, he finally did, but also felt a bit troubled. He still followed Harrow, and I guess one of his more character development of Jet was the fact that he may have been a little bit guy who seeks a challenge, but he still felt loyalty towards his friends and never gave up fighting for them. It's just that in the end of the manga, he decided to fight for himself, not just for his friends. In that way, I felt it was pretty subverted what he had learned. Don't get me wrong, Jet was more of the stoic, a little bit more calm type of, even calmer than, well, Mushika most of the times, because he never openly admitted, that the gangs were friends, but he never really said that they were not friends either. So his character development was basically just admitting that Haru was a strong warrior and he gained strength fighting with them, but also gained strength for fighting for himself. Julia, his love, gets in the story half of the story, and her character development was basically that she opened herself up a little bit more and showed fierce loyalty towards all her friends. And even though she was very tsundere towards Jet, she in the end proved that she really loved him. And Bellanica, the final girl that joined, at first timid and shy, eventually fell in love with Haru, but knew that Haru wouldn't answer her feelings, and but made up for that through courage. So I mean, the character development of the characters were not immense. Granted, this was only a manga of 298 chapters, I think. So it wasn't that much character development. But the characters were unquestionably good in heart and soul. They may not have been very much to relate to, but it is what it is. The antagonists, on the other hand, they were pretty mixed. The first antagonist, King, was a man who was driven by despair. And nowadays, a lot of people do not like characters that are full of despair, but I like them because it's true. Despair can drive you insane. I would have become insane if it weren't for the fact that I don't know how to become insane. Because I have drowned in despair a lot. His son Lucia was more of an example of a guy who had been denied everything and just had a suicidal cosmic tantrum that was very powerful. That made him pretty flat as a villain, more like a whiny brat. But it's true though that he really was hurt. Endless, as I said before, didn't really have a presence. He was just there, and he was what's that word? Very dangerous anyway. So and finally the demon lords, they were strange, difficult to understand, and it wasn't even clear where they came from until the end. They didn't really had much of a personality there either. But it was also Droy, a demon lord, who the only enemy really in this story that didn't have a connection to any one of the other antagonists, and was just there. So I mean, I can understand what people say that the villains may not have felt extremely fleshed out. Some villains of the groups were just powerful and just there. But it is what it was, and despite that, a lot of the characters were evil. Drew was an example of a tragic villain, though. He didn't start evil, but he became evil because of other people's incidents. And I have to admit, and I have to say, that fight scene between Droy and Team Rave is arguably one of the best fights of the entire manga, because it's teamwork. And yes, speaking of that, a mermaid even joined the team in that saga, and but unfortunately, she didn't join in the rest of the adventure. She stayed behind because she was a mermaid, and Seria, I think her name was. She was a very nice character, nice, kind-hearted mermaid that was very beautiful. And even though she fell in love with Haru, she knew that he wouldn't answer his feeling either. So I think that was just an example of ally there and there, but not an ally that was gonna be with them. In fact, she wasn't even in the epilogue, which I felt was a huge amount of waste. So she had potential, but in the end, it wasn't just there. And uh, also worth noting that Rave Master had a lot of filler arcs, a lot of stories that just felt like, okay, what was just that? It just felt so out of place and didn't really make any sense. But they they were just breather. Having said all those things, I still strongly believe that Raymaster was an unappreciated fantasy classic. It had an enormous amount of heartwarming, more heartwarming than you can care to imagine. The fact that Haru's journey begins, the fact that he also wants to find his father, only for have that father sacrifice his life to save Haru, is a heartbreaking scene. It even gets further to see when we see the first glimpses of Ellie's past, even though we don't know who she is at that moment. It just shows at once upon a time a very more happy Ellie, and then get so sad of it that then was denied it all. The dancing maiden, the maiden that dance that when Ellie danced and dancing maiden connected to Risha, the girl that in the end also was an emotional thing when we find out in the end that Ellie was Risha all along. Just had been in suspended animation for 50 years, so she hadn't aged. Although a lot of clues were already there, was also missing at all. So I felt like the heartwarming deep down and Haru's enormous amount of law-loving hero is one of the strongest suit of Raymaster ever. The story, while many may complain, is easy to understand, and you have to appreciate it for what it is. You have to read the right arcs and see the bigger picture in them. See that the journey justifies the means, and even though some villains were redeemed, even though it felt pretty strange, they were there for the emotion of proving that the Rave heroes all stay strong. I can agree the first 100 chapters felt a little slow and a little bit confusing, but that's because I think even Hiromashima was pretty unsure on where he was going to take the story. But once we got to the droid section, or before that, it just felt like a nice emotional journey that with friends standing by each other. The end of the fact that we had to say goodbye to some characters that were occurring also. A very emotional death on many levels. And even that ending, even though a lot of people do complain about that ending, I feel it is heartwarming. It just shows that the world can be moved by other people's actions. So I think people need to look at the bigger picture of it all. Evolved as the story went on, and I feel like it has been a nice, amazing journey. The combat system, the fights in the manga wasn't the best, but that was Hiromishima's style. For him, it's not to create an immense amount of fights, but the system worked. The Darkbring and the Raves were pretty simple. There wasn't no real magic except from Aetherius and some other people. And that could have felt pretty bland. But I still believe that it was a nice twist of it all. Also, is the fact that what were the heartwarmingness of the fights? What was I thinking about that? When friends stand by each other and fought, has proved many different results. And also this story, as I said before, this was Hiroshima's first success, and it showed how he would evolve as a writer. A lot of people today complain about Hiroshima, calling him a very untalented artist and a very untalented writer. Some even say that he is a talented artist, just not a writer. And others say he's just a plagiaristic writer. I wanna give them all the middle finger of it all because I'm saying, well, hey, then you try to create a story. No, seriously, do create a story. I would love to read one because I love fantasy stories and I want to create a story myself. I wish I could draw for the life of me, but I can't draw. So don't go complaining about someone who cannot draw if you can't draw yourself. That's what I'm saying. And if you can draw, then be courageous and spread that. And then and I also said when he grew as a writer is the fact that a lot of his recurring themes in this manga would become very popular in fairy tale. Well, popular is a strong word. It would become acceptable. Maybe is the right word, because fan service was in Rave Master, but it was not as much as in fairy tale. But it was there. A lot of most of the panties joke. Also, the fact he's very famous to pulling some things that people call the Trollshima moment. When you believe something else, then you read the next chapter and it turned out like that. You can see that trend already here in Rave Master. And the fact that I read Rave Master a little bit, I had read Fairy Tail, and when I started reading Rave Master, I got more accepted about Fairy Tail because I saw the same themes. And although he didn't really develop huge amount of big breasted girls in this manga until much later, it was clear that they were there, they were strong. And I also feel like Hiro Mishima is one of the few people who actually can write a female character right. Yes, you may complain that he only writes them sexy and stuff, but he also do have involved stories where the women of Raid Master have fought, even in Fairy Tail, and they have won. A lot of people do not, a lot of the shonen trumps do not get that honor. So I feel like a lot of people should not complain about that. And as I said before, his art evolved. Even in Fairy Tail, it started a little bit awkward, but then eventually became a lot more cleaner. So I feel like Rave Master is something everyone who enjoys fantasy should read. You will feel a lot of familiarity in these fantasy trends, maybe even from books of real-life fantasy that you have read before. The trend about journeying together with your friends, finding that thing and stopping the ultimate evil is recurring. That's something you see in every kind of fantasy. But it still plays it off here. I feel like Rave Master is an unappreciated cult classic, and you need to look at the bigger picture. You may not enjoy every single Rave Master chapter, and you have to have patience reading Rave Master. You have to go through 100 chapters and just enjoy what you see. You may feel like some characters are not really that memorable, not even by design. But you will also see that this is how he got his start, and that's how he developed Fairy Tail. So I think if you read Rave Master, you will have a greater appreciation of Fairy Tail after that. And what else is there to say about it? Well, yeah, as I said before, the emotion. It is emotions there. Rave Master did have an anime, but unfortunately, I would not recommend seeing that anime. The anime is awkwardly animated, and well, even the dub is pretty bad. Even though it was noteworthy voice cast, even the sub felt pretty bland. Although I will give praise for the first opening. The first opening of Rave Master was pretty amazing. But I wouldn't recommend the Rave Master anime. It just feels a little awkward. And unfortunately, they stopped right when Rave Master was starting to get a little bit more interesting. Which is the problem, I think, why a lot of people do not read Rave Master. Because where the anime stopped is usually where a lot of people did not want to read those sections of the manga because they felt like, yeah, that story was pretty bad. And yes, but as I said before, Rave Master may not be perfect, but it's definitely not a bad work. It's a cult classic that is good for what it is. Enjoy for what you can see of it. And do read it. Read it and talk to me in a live stream if you want. What you feel about it. And many things more. Because I will stick true to my beliefs on saying that Hiro Mishima is a good artist and a good writer. I like his storylines. Friends are pretty difficult to find. Will you ever find a friend that will go to hells on earth in order to fight alongside you? Well, I don't know. It's basically my talk about Rave Master. A lot of that talk I probably talked in my other video that I will have it in the description below. But if you see this video all to the end, do give me your thoughts if you have any.